Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Season 7, Episode 9 of the Clone Wars. Old Friends, Not Forgotten. This is the beginning of the finale, and the first bit of the Siege of Mandalore, happening simultaneously alongside the Siege of Coruscant. Makes sense. Actually explains a few things, if you think about it from a zoomed-out perspective. New intro. No quote. Using the classic music. The only thing it says is Part 1. I have a few thoughts about that, but I'm actually going to save them for right now, because we'll see. So, the Clone Wars are progressing, and in order to strike back, several of the Jedi have been dispatched to very familiar spots. Something I've talked about a few times is several times I noticed Grievous was updated to look like the movie thing. Didn't even animate him, probably because, several times when you're making something, you make something for people who are new. Sometimes you make something for people who are, familiar with the work, and sometimes you actually manage both, which is the hardest thing of all. This is very clearly made for people who are already fans of Star Wars. People who have already watched the prequel movies and who have already watched all of Clone Wars up to this point in time. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. This is the finale. If there's ever a time to do that, this is it, right? I don't want to bring up Mass Effect for the 7,000th time, but in Mass Effect 3, it's perfectly acceptable to design it for people who have been following the franchise the whole time, right? So, yeah. Lower Decks is designed for people who already like Trek. There's a logic. By the way, I do apologize for being late today. I'd like to give you some big, fanciful excuse about how I was giving medicine to sick orphans, but the harsh truth is I was just exhausted, and I just went back to bed. Anyways, so, gotta admit, that defensive fortification on the bridge is a little bit entrenched, and then Anakin shows up. You're not serious. There's only 1,000 droids up there, tops. Now, we can do things your way and let people in the city suffer a little bit longer, or we can do things my way and help them now. Now, this is obviously a little bit comical and a deliberate callback to, I believe, the film. But the interesting thing about this is, other than, humorous and lighthearted and silly, with the adventurous music playing and everything's being kind of joked around, this is a continuing trend of that positive feedback loop, or to be slightly more specific, the reinforcement loop that Anakin has been going through this entire war. If he does things his way, he gets results. And that's the thing. As absolutely bizarre as it sounds, if I honestly feel like Anakin's descent into the dark side would have been interrupted if it was failing more often. If he didn't get results, if he wasn't helping people, if he wasn't saving lives. But almost persistently and consistently, and the show does a really good job of this, it usually does work out for him. So he keeps doing things that way, and tends to escalate a little bit, right? So, surrender. Oh, that's a relief. I'm sorry. The B1s, gotta love the B1s. Probably, if I'm right at all, probably for the last time in this show, we get to see the B1s and their little bit of humor, tone, vibe. I don't know what to call that. I also love R2 just kind of literally hanging on the side of the bridge there. Yeah, anyways, so, oh my god, we've got a message from Fulcrum. It's got to be Saw Gerrera. You better come take a look at this. Anybody notice that on the ship, the lighting is a little bit different? Yes, faking a surrender is a war crime. Actually, a lot of things are war crimes. People, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, something people tend to do, and I've noticed this especially in the last few years, especially as a part of political rhetoric, not just in my country, just everywhere, is that a lot of people tend to use the word war crime when that's not actually what they mean at all. What they mean when they say war crime is crime but worse. Right? Most people use the phrase war crime as crime plus one. It's not actually how that works. There's actually a fairly large amount of war crimes that apply to a lot of things that you wouldn't really think they do. Things that seem otherwise banal or normal because, duh. Yeah, the Geneva Convention is its own legal framework and is there to provide a lot of political and legal support for cross-country prosecution. That's pretty much the purpose behind it. There's other stuff. Don't want to get too much into it. You get the idea, right? So, yes, what Anakin does here is a war crime, and that is absolutely a truth. But having said that, do I think what he did was correct? Well, that's an interesting question, because again, that's not really the question to be asked here, is it? It did work, after all. It's just a bunch of droids. I mean, they're not even people, right? Anyways, so the lighting's different. The lighting on the ship is very Imperial. It was the first thing I noticed, because you know me in visuals and visual design. And, like, there's this wonderful shading going. It's not ominous, right? It's not like the full-on Sith look. But that's definitely how a lot of Imperial ships look. If you don't know what I mean by that, in your head, or if you have the time, go back and watch, like, even the original trilogy, but also quite a few things do that. The Imperial ships are all dimmed more than they should be. There's bright lights, there's harsh lights in several directions. We actually even commented on this in Arcane, because Arcane does the same thing. The bad guy's lair is cast differently in shadows, whereas the good guy's lairs are almost always bright lights everywhere, like this diffused lighting, like we were talking about. So like this right here, this level of lighting and the style of lighting, this would be the good guy's lair. I need something white. I guess Wikipedia's white. There we go. Whereas something more like this kind of lighting, this is the villain's lair, right? You get it. Like, you can still see what's going on here. I'm still visible. You can still see my digits. But this is the way that they use visual shorthand to indicate this is the bad guy. Now, it's not this bad, obviously, because I just did this right off the fly, off the top of my head. But you get the idea. So they're kind of doing this transition thing into this type of lighting here. Yeah, Darth Boulder. Still out there somewhere. So, it's Ahsoka. Yay! I love how Anakin... Yeah, compare the nod and the GD. That's another great example of that. Anakin is literally speechless when he sees Ahsoka. He also then asks several questions in quick succession. First question, how are you? Second question, where are you? Third question, are you okay? All three of those questions are very Anakin. Anakin is also so happy to see her, and every time she's anything other than happy back, he's downcast. This whole scene, there's several scenes where he's like, And it's not until finally, it's not until he comes up with the compromise that then splits off the 501st into the 332nd to go with her, and they go off to the Coruscant, and they go off to Mandalore. It's not until that compromise happens that he finally relaxes a bit, because now she's treating him in a more positive way, and it's like, oh, thank God, she misses me as much as I missed her. And there's like this relief visible in his body language, because up till then he's, well, you know how it is, right? Has there ever been anybody in your real life, you don't have to answer this out loud, where you've been really missing them for a while and you go to see them and you're like, yes, it's you, hey! And they are not as enthusiastic back. Maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a loved one. And you just haven't seen them in a while and you're just so excited to see them, and they are not excited to see you back. Actually, the bot isn't even up. I know exactly how that feels, consequently. Of course I do. He would be excited to see me. But I do know what that feels like, and that's kind of the vibe Anakin's giving across this whole time. Is, ha! Oh, and he's just it's hitting him. It's hitting him. I actually feel bad for him. So here's the thing. Well, that's even worse, we'll just know. Here's the thing. One of the biggest question marks a lot of people have raised for a lot of years is, hold on, you introduced this whole character who had this big connection to Anakin, who's not even mentioned in Episode 3, because she was introduced after it. What the hell, right? What was Ahsoka doing during Episode 3? I myself asked this question. But hang on. Now, I have not read that comic where Maul was released or got out or whatever. But one of the things that Palpatine did say very specifically was, I have specific plans for you. And Palpatine lets Maul go, who goes back to Mandalore, who tries to lay a trap for Obi-Wan, and manages to pull Ahsoka away. Think about it. That actually makes perfect sense in hindsight. Maul was the perfect additional distraction to distract either Ahsoka or Obi-Wan, because he was expecting one or the other, from Anakin, removing the two sanity anchors that Anakin has from his life so that Palpatine could finally make his move. And now, it didn't work on Obi-Wan, it worked on Ahsoka. So naturally, the next thing he does is he gives away information on where Grievous is. Remember that? In the actual movie, Palpatine ensures that the Republic gets word of, here's where Grievous is hiding. Which sends Obi-Wan away. And this actually works really well, all things considered. Like, one of the things, it's so difficult to do this. It's so difficult to write a character who is intelligent without just making them magic, right? Without just making them win. But if you're paying attention, what Palpatine is doing here is very adaptive. This isn't so much part of his plan as making sure he has options. And once things happen, he's like, okay. Remove from the board. Remove from the board. He's dynamic, and that's very Palpatine. If in my forgive me for saying this, but in my opinion, Palpatine has always been at his best, not when he has everything planned out 15 moves in advance, but when he is adapting to the enemy's moves on the fly like that. Speed chess, to be more specific. Some people, for those of you not aware of the analogy, some people can play chess, like entire chess matches in their head, like 15, 20, 30 moves in advance. That's crazy, by the way, that some people can do that. Some people play chess matches 1 second in advance, very, very quickly. I've actually played I'm better at speed chess myself, consequently. And I'm not saying that I'm Palpatine. It's just... yet. But the point is, that's Palpatine's style and approach, and it is generally where he tends to be better as a character, in my opinion, when he's looking at the situation and adapts to it on the fly. So, Anakin, I do find this interesting to think about. What if Anakin and Obi-Wan had been swapped here? Just food for thought. Either way, there's a couple of other little tidbits here that I feel are worthy of drawing attention to. First of all, there's this really interesting tidbit where Obi-Wan clearly wants to go after Maul, and he's clearly worked up over Maul, and yet he is still keeping control of his emotions. In fact, Obi-Wan, who has a far more personal grudge against Maul, is the one who is keeping control of his emotions better than Anakin, who is watching him in the situation. There's this wonderful scene where Obi-Wan says, "Of course I care, but I cannot let my emotions cloud my judgment." Now, I could be reading entirely too much into this, but at this point, I don't think I am. I honestly think that Anakin, in that moment, whether he even realized it or not, decided not to confide in Obi-Wan going forward. Remember, the visions really get started after this point, at least in the movies. You know, the visions of what's going to happen to Padme. He never goes to Obi-Wan about those. Obi-Wan knows about Padme. See the logic here. You see, and what's really funny is this is so clearly not planned out by the creators. But I do think they're doing what an interquel or a prequel can do some really good stuff with. Trying to patch holes and fill in things and explain things a little bit better. So, okay, with that, It's also worth noting that Obi-Wan, despite all his hesitance and statements, is obviously and visibly considering going straight to Mandalore to beat the ever-living crap out of Maul. They obviously all want Maul very badly. Understandable. He's the one Sith Lord they know about who isn't Dooku, Tyrannus. And Tyrannus, he's over at Coruscant right now. I have no idea, Trax, yeah. I don't know Shakti that well. Although she was almost getting close to that chip, wasn't she? Hey, Mike. Thank you very, very much for the sub. As always. And if you want to put that towards up to 3 things, please let me know. Actually, if I can derail for one quick second. So I've had an asshole commenting on my videos for the last several days. Just leaving nitpicky comments on it. It's actually been hilarious. I've been sharing it with friends. But what I find most interesting about the comments they've been leaving is that they have been specifically stating that all retcons are bad. That if you retcon something, it's a negative 100% of the time. Which I obviously disagree with. But I find it interesting how many people have that perspective. There's a reason I feel the need to push back against that perspective regularly and repeatedly. We've had reviews where I've mentioned something and someone... No, this is a real thing that's been happening, Rex. Last few days. This is something where I've had to push back because we're reviewing a specific game. And someone will say, well, this is retcon from the previous game. Isn't that a bad thing? And I have to explain. A retcon is not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. It's what you do with it that matters. Right? Now, I do understand that there's plenty of bad retcons, Trahexio. But that doesn't make retcons bad. Right? Like, that's not how that works. And it's dismissive and deleterious to actually presume such a thing. It's like fan fiction. Is fan fiction automatically bad? No, of course not. That's stupid. I get why people say it that way, but that doesn't change it from being stupid. Moving on. So, getting back to the episode at hand. Yeah, I Am Your Father is actually a retcon. That's very true. For those of you aware of that. Let's see here. Seriously, Sajuk? I mean, I believe you. I've had some weirdos in my comment sections over the years. I usually let them leave their comments as long as they don't cross over a particular line. But it is funny seeing this like 6-page essay talking about each retcon and actually getting some of it wrong, too. That's even funnier. I'm getting off topic. Double-checking things. So, everyone, of course, there's this weird thing here. So, everyone's saluting Ahsoka as they go by. That's a nice touch. What is not a nice touch is Anakin feels the need to actually state out loud what's going on. I've noticed this about Filoni's writing, who wrote this episode, by the way. This is definitely better written than the freaking filler arc was. But he still has some of the hallmarks of a bad writer. I don't have a better way to say that. Of someone who is not really polished as writing it. He feels the need to state things outright too much or too obviously. Because you could say it's an example of show and then tell. But it isn't show and then tell if I pick up something and then you immediately, seconds later, say, you've picked up a back scratcher. That's just telling at that point. You need to have something where it's like, something is shown, right? And then the audience is given a chance to process it, and we see reaction to it, and we see, some kind of the significance of it. And then later on, someone can say, preferably to someone who isn't automatically aware of what's going on, oh yeah, no, that was the back scratcher he picked up. Because Ahsoka's not stupid. Of course she understands why they're all saluting to her, and of course it's self-apparent. The only reason Anakin is saying this is for the audience. Ahsoka doesn't need to be told this, right? All Anakin really needed to say in the scene was, as Ahsoka is just like, she's watching them salute commanders, I wish they'd stop calling me commander. I left the order. And then Anakin gets up to the wall, just kind of smiles at her and says, well, to the clones. And then he just leaves that sentence hanging there. And then the door opens and they see all of the 501st with Ahsoka's colors on their helmets. That's all he needs to say. I know writers who use subtext. They're all cowards. But in all honesty, to be a little bit more understanding, because it's not like I don't get it, one of the things that I understand as a writer is that fear of being too overt and simultaneously the fear of being too quiet about something. You worry that people aren't going to pick up on things, and you worry that you're going to be too obvious about things, right? And so you're trying to get somewhere in the middle here, and you're constantly like, and it's made worse by the fact that everyone is different. So not everyone is going to be able to catch things that some other people will be able to. So I do get it. I just wanted to comment on it because this whole episode, this is just one example, but this whole episode is Filoni's writing in a nutshell, based on what I saw in the previous quadrilogy. Anyways, so everyone's saluting her. You know, they've got the helmet. This is really cool. Everything's awesome. And then they're interrupted by the battle at Coruscant. And that means episode 3 just started. And now the clock is ticking. So Anakin gives her back her sabers, which of course he tinkered with, because of course he did. And there's also a nice little tidbit, and this is good writing. It's not like Filoni's a hack writer, where as Obi-Wan decides to leave, may the Force be with you. And then as Anakin decides to leave, good luck. So, we scooch forward a little bit. Bo-Katan had really wants Maul. It's actually kind of shocking how much she wants Maul. Oh yeah, speaking of which, I did do a little bit of side research. Apparently there are, as Rax just said, fan edits, which actually either splice together or splice side by side episode 3 and these final 4 episodes, which makes sense. The mere fact that we established that clock right here, even if I wasn't already suspecting this, which I was, it's clear this is now a full integral. You notice I called it that earlier, to episode 3. I would be shocked if this episode does not end right about the time that episode 3 concludes. He did kill her sister, although she helped depose her sister. And I like how, and in this case I'm actually with it, I like how she never mentions that, and she's just really angry at Maul. Which makes sense, because let's be honest, she's probably a little bit angry at herself for that one, too. So they have their first landing on Mandalore, opening up with a battle sequence. I mentioned it before, almost all of the Clone Wars story arcs. Almost all of the Clone Wars story arcs have at least one major battle in them, right? I'm not sure if this is it, but the initial attack on Mandalore certainly would qualify for the typical example of this type of thing. Good battle sequence. Legitimately good battle sequence. Unlike most of your typical battle sequences, and I remember I mentioned earlier, there's the type where everything's just in stasis, and then there's the type where it's Yu-Gi-Oh! This one's a pretty good give and take. We see how they progress, we see how they land, we see how they counteract each other. I'm kind of with it. There's some actual thought and effort put into the sequencing of what's happening and why. It's also doubly interesting because both sides, ironically, don't really care all that much about killing each other. I mean, they do, they're enemies, but like, the goal is not to just win. Both sides are focused entirely on the king, Maul. The clones did completely suck in the pipe ambush. That was, I don't know what the hell was going on with that. And we see, Vaughn's dead. No! Who's Vaughn? Well, he was introduced about 30 seconds ago. Anyways, probably the most red-shirty thing I've seen Star Wars do in a long time. I do like the interplay of the jetpacks and the laps. I do like how Ahsoka quickly and efficiently determines that those jetpacks are a weak point in addition to a tool in their favor. Something that's used pretty consistently throughout Star Wars, actually. Maybe one of the biggest reasons why most people don't use jetpacks. Might play with that in the rewrite. I don't know. We'll think about it. I also do like the race you to the surface thing. Ha ha ha. I also like the color coding. Did you catch that? Most of Maul's defenders have specifically painted the stylings of their helmets to match him. There's even spikes on one of the helmets from one of the commanders. I didn't catch who. And of course, you know, Bo-Katan's people are blue, and the Republic's have got the blue and the Ahsoka paint. So there you go. Cool. What I find most amusing about all of this is everyone here is so desperate to get to Maul. All of them. That Maul could so effortlessly use this as a trap for greater political play and power if he wanted to, or had the political acumen to do so. But I don't think he wants to, and I'm not even sure he can. Maul consistently, and I am admittedly pulling a little bit from the future here as well, but Maul consistently likes to think that he's a big manipulator, and he super isn't. He's just not at the level of some of the people who actually know how to manipulate and navigate the way through political space. He's also someone who has a little bit more knowledge than everyone else does about Palpatine, having been alongside him for so long, and also knows that Palpatine can do pretty much whatever he wants to with him, pretty much whenever he wants to. I'm not sure of his exact motivations here, but I did notice... Yeah, exactly, Act. You notice the guy has freaking gold armor, by the way. Jesus Christ. Yeah, Maul is literally a rat in a sewer. I've been trying not to for avoidance of spoilers, but all I'm going to say is Rebels. I have a prediction right now, and I remember I haven't seen these episodes. I predict that Maul is acting out of spite. I think that Maul is trying for one last minuscule victory before he knows he's screwed forever. Yeah, one last revenge. It's all he's got left at this point. Now, we'll see how that goes, but that's my take on it right now. Especially that last little line. Because, of course, this was actually a trap the whole time. But you're the wrong Jedi. Yeah, one last thing before Palpatine just sweeps the board. I really like the moment where they reveal Maul. Like, we know Maul's there, but they still do a good job with it. The clanking of his artificial legs. You know, just Kong. That's actually pretty powerful. And did you notice there was no outro music too? It's Sam Witwer, right? I meant to look that up. I'm almost positive it is. Yep, nope, I'm right. It is Sam Witwer. Great actor. Not actually in a huge number of stuff, but where he is, he's good. And yeah, he does a good Maul. Yeah, he sounds exactly as on edge and struggling as he probably should. He really hasn't been in much stuff. That's a damn shame. That man knows what he's doing. Wait, they actually brought in Ray Park for motion capture? Nice. I know, right, Blinterval? Yeah, I've also heard his Palpatine. He does a good Palpatine as well. And, of course, Starkiller. Which makes sense, considering Starkiller was originally supposed to be Maul. Anyways. So, yeah, let's cover this. What do we got? Let's think about this. What color do we think this one deserves? I tend to agree with the crowd here. Yeah, it really does, Cashel. I tend to agree with the crowd here. This is a solid red, I think. This is a damned good episode. Powerful, impacting, funny, interesting, good dialogue, good character dynamics, tons of foreshadowing, an actually good battle sequence. Yeah, I think I could feel this building up to purple pretty easily, which is funny because we actually have already gone through that particular arc. Yeah, it doesn't have that extra oomph, but we'll see. Because I have a theory. And I just it's literally just a vague feeling, and I could be extremely wrong here. I feel like this is their attempt at a redo on episode 3. They can't actually get rid of episode 3 for whatever reason. Instead, they kind of want to add to it, recontextualize it, fill over some holes, do some polishing passes. And that's the vibe I've been getting very strongly here. And again, I don't really have any strong evidence of that. I have no behind the scenes, no interviews, no nothing. I just feel like this is them being like, let's try to recontextualize episode 3 and make it even better. And I should mention, I actually really like episode 3. But episode 3 also has some really serious flaws and faults to it. So... yeah, an actual remake of episode 3. If they're ever going to do it, they're running out of time. Hayden Christensen's getting there. And yeah, I feel like the Clone Wars show in general is trying to polish up the prequels a little bit. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording